Hey everybody, I'm Ebony. This is Ebony's Creativity. Thank you so much for joining me here on my channel. Today's video is slightly different from my normal format where I kind of just have a vision and carry it out. That's because the original vision that I had to restore this piece did not quite work out. Then I tried to whitewash it. That didn't quite work out. So I ended up doing something a little bit different than what I would typically do for a piece with this age. I did try to sell this piece to a couple antique shops locally and nobody was really interested in it. So I had to do what I had to do to sell it. Hopefully you will still enjoy the video even if you are against painting furniture. If you have not yet, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching and let's hop right on into this video. Here is today's project. It is part of a set that I showed in my previous decor haul video. As you can see, the finish is not in great condition at all and it is pretty much failing all over the piece. Even through the failing finish, you can still see that this has some really nice designs in the wood, so I want to make sure that I preserve those. From this angle, you can really see just how badly the finish is failing all over the piece. There's a lot of damage on the outside, but the inside is in beautiful, pristine condition, so that's always a good thing. It's really dirty though, and it could definitely use a good cleaning, so we'll get to that a little later in the video. As always, there's going to be a lot of sanding involved in this project, so I am starting out with 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to be removing all of this failing finish from the outside of this piece. The sides were so beat up and failing so badly that I just decided to try to scrape the initial layer of scum and damage off, and then went in with sanding after that. As I was sanding this, inevitably I did burn through some of this veneer, but I'll show how I'm going to address that later in the video. And of course, to sand the front of this, I'm going to have to remove the hardware, and I'm just using a screwdriver to do that. I like to do as much sanding as possible with my orbital sander because I really hate hand sanding. But as you can see, this area on the front of this drawer is like a square shape, and an orbital sander is a circle, of course. So I did have to end up breaking out my Dremel to get to some of those hard to reach areas. Here's how this looked when everything except the trim was sanded. At this point, there was so much sand and dust that I just started to go ahead and clean the piece down just so I could really see what I was working with and to get rid of some of these cobwebs. Also, I was trying to still get my vision together for how this piece would look once completed, so I thought maybe cleaning it up a little bit would help me kind of decide what to do with it. But to be honest, that didn't help, and I was really stuck with a vision for this, so I just decided to continue working on it, and I broke out my chemical stripper to get the trim since I don't have a sander that can appropriately sand this. After just a few minutes, the sander started to bubble, so that is a really good sign for me. Then I went in with some steel wool and I was successfully able to strip all of the trim pieces. If you've watched my channel before, you know I really don't like chemical strippers, but in this case, it really worked better than ever for me. Here's how the top trim looked after the stripper was applied, and once again, I just scrubbed it with steel wool. So at this point, everything has been completely stripped. You can see the areas that I used the liquid stripper are still a little bit grungy looking. So now I'm going to go in with some steel wool and some mineral spirits to clean those up as well. The mineral spirits will help to stop the stripper from working, and that is exactly what I need so that my finish can be properly applied. So now all my stripper has been wiped off with the mineral spirits and I'm just waiting for this to dry. In the meantime, I'm going to fix this little area here by using some wood filler. And now that the mineral spirits has dried, I'm going to go back and hand sand all of these areas where I used the liquid stripper just for extra cleanup and to make sure it's nice and smooth. Now that this has been completely stripped, I'm going to go ahead and wipe everything down again. I'm just using a microfiber cloth and some Dawn. You can kind of see as I'm cleaning the areas where I have burned through the veneer. So we'll talk about that in just a second. If you recall how dirty that inside was, you'll know I spent a good deal of time cleaning that out. My initial plan for this piece was to whitewash it, so I started out doing that. I have some fusion paint in the color cashmere mixed with about 3 parts water to 1 part paint, and I've made a paint wash which I'm applying over the whole piece. If you're not familiar with paint washing, this is a technique where you still want to be able to see the wood grain, but you also want a wash of color. So in this case, I want a wash of this white color, but I don't want it to be completely opaque, so I'm not painting it. In this picture, you can see the difference. The left is untouched and the right has the paint wash applied. Here's some more footage of me applying this paint wash. Typically, I work in the direction of the wood grain. However, sometimes I find it difficult, like if I'm going from trim to trim, like if I have a certain stopping point, I find it difficult to get all the way down against the bottom trim. Like you can see on the bottom, I'm kind of missing it because it's kind of difficult for me to get all the way in there. So I'm going horizontally against the top trim and against the trim on the bottom. But when I wipe it back, I'll always make sure to move in the direction of the wood grain. After stepping back to look at this, I decided that I just did not like the whitewash, so I knew I had to go back to the drawing board. But in the meantime, I'm going to move on to cleaning the hardware up, which I'm going to be doing with the barkeeper's friend. I'd never tried this before, but I was hoping if I put the barkeeper's friend in the jar and added some water and put the lid back on and shook it up, that it would help clean the hardware where I didn't have to scrub, but ultimately that did not work. So here I am scrubbing with steel wool. I know there's a whole army of people who don't like when you paint older furniture, but as you can see, there's some areas here where I burned through the veneer. There's some areas where I think it was already just kind of tore up from the failing finish that it had before. So I am going to just go ahead and paint some of this. I'm going to leave as much natural as I can, but I just did not like it paint washed, and I have to do what I feel I have to do to be able to sell this piece. As I mentioned in the video where I first hauled this piece, I have the matching 6-foot dresser, so it's a really large piece, and that's part of the reason why the local antique shops wouldn't take it. It's just too huge of a set, which I understood. I did look on Cherish and I saw that these two pieces together could go somewhere from around $2,000 to $5,000. However, I don't have that buyer locally and I don't have the capability to ship right now. So I have to do what I have to do to get these pieces in and out. So hopefully you can understand that if you are against furniture being painted. I did consider staining it back a dark color, but I don't think that would sell as well as this look. I think this look is going to be much more modern and it will help appeal to many more customers than a dark brown stain would. I am trying to preserve as much of the natural beauty of this as possible, but with all the different mismatched wood tones and everything, this was just best. So here's how this looks after one coat of paint. As you can see, some areas are still a little bit translucent, so I'm going to go ahead and do another layer off camera. I'm thinking about reusing the original hardware, so I went ahead and sprayed them with this primer, and then I went in with this black Rust-Oleum flat paint. Here's where we are after 2 coats of paint have been applied. So now I'm going to be doing 2 coats of polyacrylic as my top coat. And I am going to be using that all over on the painted surfaces as well as on the whitewashed surfaces. So now I'm just reattaching the hardware. Then I'm going to shine the whole inside up with this Howard's Feed and Wax. And without further ado, here is the finished look. Leave me a comment and let me know how you think this piece turned out. I'm also curious to know if you would like to see a part 2 where I do the bigger matching piece to this set. If you have the time, please select another one of my videos to watch from the choices on the screen or in the description box below.